Good morning, my name is Iris Rama and I have a problem. More specifically, I have a dilemma. And my dilemma is this. On the one hand, you see, I do understand that European cooperation and European unity to a point is actually a good thing, and it's a necessary thing, and it's a useful thing. Because honestly, do we really want to keep Europe under the thumb of foreign occupation, under the thumb of the Americans and NATO and China and Russia? Because that's what Europe is right now. We are, as a continent, firmly under the thumb of foreign powers. It's sad to have to say, it's sad to admit, but it's the observable truth. We can observe this. Take, for instance, the United States. There's still thousands upon thousands of American soldiers on European soil today. Thousands upon thousands of American soils, and most of these are in Germany and Italy and Belgium, but not just that, like literally spread out all across Europe, and there are thousands of them. It's an entire army of American soldiers stationed in Europe. Because every time Europe needs anything, let's say military related, we look to the US, we look to Washington, or at least our so-called leaders look to Washington. Because for some reason we just can't do our own stuff anymore. We can't defend ourselves, we can't fight for ourselves, we can't defend our own borders. So we always look to Washington. Isn't that odd? But not just that, of course. There's more than that. It's also on the policy level, on the laws level, on the rules level, on the actually having a vision for the future level. Because we always see that, and this happens especially on the EU level, in Europe and Brussels itself, that they like to look at what the Americans are doing and then copy-paste what they're saying straight into European policy. We've seen this, for instance, with the Green Deal. Like literally control-P'd out of Washington into Brussels. But then I have to ask myself, why are we doing this? Can we really not come up with our own ideas, which are tailor-made to Europe, which are actually address Europe's problems rather than just work for America's advantage? So this is one way in which we are under the heel, and yes, we are under the heel of the Americans. Because don't forget that our own European Commission, and then I use again our in, with the fingers. Our own European Commission has stated time and time again that they are transatlanticist, meaning that they believe that Europe's defense should be totally NATO based, totally the responsibility of NATO. The only problem is that NATO is the de facto occupational force, American occupational force of Europe. It is the front organization for the US occupation of Europe. It is an extension of American global policy. It's an extension of the Pentagon. Everything that NATO does, it does it because the US wants it. And we see this time and time again. For instance, when Mark Rutte, the disgraced Prime Minister of the Netherlands, allowed his own cabinet to collapse last year, but somehow he's still ruling the Netherlands, of course, even though he quit his job. But you see how that works. When he allowed his own cabinet to collapse, he said he would not ever do anything political again. He was sick of politics. And then he went to Washington to go and ask the American president if he could please be allowed to lead NATO, to be the Secretary General of NATO, since the old guy is buggering off. Why did he do this? Why did he go there before going, I don't know, through Europe, you know? Because NATO is run from Washington. It's an American extension. It's an American proxy organization. It's an American front organization, which is why we in Europe need to get rid of NATO. And this is why I think that European cooperation is actually important and necessary. Because European cooperation can actually be an alternative to NATO. It can be an alternative to NATO. We as Europeans can have a European defense community. And I'm not talking about like a European army or whatever. No, I'm not talking about that. Because let me be clear about this. We can never have a European army that is under the command of the European Commission. Can you think of this? I mean, my God, what the hell would happen? This would be insane, because the European Commission is not elected by anything. So then you have people in the European Parliament who are saying we need a European army. But that European army, who would it respond to? Under whose command would it be? So no, that's a bad idea, to have an army which is under the command of a regime, a junta, under somebody who's never been elected by anyone. So no. But a European defense community where European countries, states, armies, they work together to actually protect Europe itself, the place that we all inhabit, all live. Yes, I think that's a good point. I think that's a good idea. I think that we actually need to fight for our own shit instead of just outsourcing everything to the US. And talking about outsourcing, the same thing happens with China. Europe's relationship with China is that China ships all its cheap plastic junk to Europe, and Europe allows it. That's pretty much the relationship here. That's pretty much how our relationship with China is right now. And we've seen this with solar panels. We've seen this with electric cars. And not that I think you should buy an electric car, because they're terribly, terribly, terribly bad for the environment. And also terribly, terribly, terribly bad for human rights. But we've seen that China has been able to take over the total market of those products. And not just those products, but those are just like glaring examples. And how has China been able to do this? Because the Chinese government subsidizes their companies like nobody's business. Because in practice, big businesses, big Chinese businesses, are de facto state-owned corporations. They are completely dependent on the Chinese state, and the Chinese state subsidizes them like nobody's business. In Europe, however, unfortunately, we have the European Commission who runs the European Union, and what they've basically said for the past, well, more than 5 years actually, decades, is that everything that China makes, they can just import it into Europe just like that. No worries about it. No worries. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to pay any import taxes, or you don't have to declare anything. We don't have to check anything. It's all good. It's all fine. Because thanks to the EU, thanks to the European Commission's insane economic theories, Europe has now been made completely dependent, economically dependent on China, because all our production comes from China. China has become Europe's factory floor. And this is a problem, because it means that Europe itself doesn't actually produce anything anymore. We just produce what? Services, which is another word for nothing tangible. Nothing tangible. Europe right now is producing very little that's actual tangible. And to make it worse, what we actually produce that is tangible, we produce for other countries. We produce in European companies which are owned by American and Chinese and Indian and Russian stockholders, but especially American, Indian and Chinese. Because, and this is the problem, and this is also something that's going on right now, because right now the European Union's bigwigs our so-called politicians, our so-called leaders, have finally realized that what they're doing is actually not such a good idea. So they've come together and said, well, we need to do something. We need to do something because all European money is flowing to the US, and then because people can't invest here. Because the problem is, though, this is mindset. Now they're trying to extend the internal market, because apparently they finally discovered that Europe can't compete, is not competing with the rest of the world. But those idiots, they've never thought, why is Europe not competing? It's because of the endless rules coming out of Europe. The endless rules coming out of Brussels and Strasbourg. Millions of rules, which means that you cannot innovate in Europe. You cannot become rich in Europe. Yeah, if your family has money and has had money for the past centuries or something, then yeah, you can stay rich. If you're rich, you can stay rich. But if you're not rich, then you will never be rich, because getting rich in Europe is actually very, very hard because it's incredibly hard to be an entrepreneur, to have a business, to start a business in Europe, because there are millions upon millions upon millions of little rules. Millions of rules which are made by the local governments, millions of rules which are made by the national governments, millions of rules which are made by the EU itself. So, yeah, then why would you invest in Europe, right? Why the hell would you? If this continent is so incredibly unfree, so restricted, then why would you? Then you might as well just bugger off to the US and start a business there, and then, I don't know, make some money there, and then come back to the EU and just buy something up with your American business or whatever. Or what happens even more is that simply this money from European investors is sent to the US, and then American investors use that European subsidy money, by the way, because a lot of the money comes straight out of the EU in the form of subsidies, use that European subsidy money to buy up European companies. This happens so often. This has happened so often. I mean, half of Europe, more than half of Europe, every European big business, by the way, is either owned by the US, China, India, Saudis, something like that. Very few companies are purely, proudly European. Very few companies, big companies in Europe, are actually owned by Europeans and actually work for Europeans, and are actually work to supply European needs and the European market alone. So this is what we see then. We see that Europe is completely dependent. We see also that Europe is practically incapable of making a fist against foreign aggressors, like, let's say, the Russians. Just to name a name, because I am not one of those who thinks that, if you don't like America, then you need to like Russia, and if you don't like Russia, then you need to like America, and so on. I don't believe that. I mean, I think that they're all in the same game in the end. It's all geopolitical games, man. And we as Europeans need to say, we're not going to be part of this. Let's just be neutral about this shit. Let's just be neutral about this shit, and let's just take care of our own problems first. And also, let's not just pretend that we have the right to police the world, that we have to go to Africa and say that, but you need to be kind to the LGBTQ and so on and so forth. No, you don't have to do that. We don't have that right as Europeans right now to police the world and show our moral superiority, because we don't have it right now. Not while the EU itself is in such a dire, crappy state. If you do not have democracy at home, then you have no moral right to go abroad to China or India or wherever and then preach democracy over there. Because right now we really don't have democracy at home. It ain't there, because don't forget, the European Commission, which is the de facto government of Europe, they make the rules. They write the rules. They write the laws. They also implement the laws. But they're not elected by anyone. So how about democracy over there? What happened there? So this is my dilemma. I see that European cooperation is actually necessary and required and useful, but on the other hand, I cannot believe in the EU. I cannot support and believe in the EU because it's so bureaucratic. It is so incredibly corrupt as well. The grift is real. It is so incredibly corrupt and bureaucratic and elitist and just unreal. It's inefficient. This is an organization that is supposed to be solving so many problems, because Europe has so many problems right now at every aspect of life, basically, and existence. Europe is in deep shit. Yet at the same time, what does the European Commission think is a good plan right now? What are the priorities? It's bring your dog to work day. Bring your dog to work day at the European Commission. Of course, there is a 6-page manual about how you need to do this as a person working for the EC, but that's just, it shows you where the priorities of the EU lie at this point, at this stage, and what they it's like, dogs at work are important because they're good against stress. It's too bad though, that all the people who don't like dogs, of which there are apparently a lot, that they are requested to not come to work and bring your dog to work day, because dogs are important, right? Dog lives matter, apparently, at least at the European Commission. But this is the problem: the fact that they do these stupid kind of wasteful, kind of moronic, nonsensical kind of initiatives, but refuse to actually look at any of the real problems that Europe is faced with today, such as food, such as GMOs, such as Russia, such as complete dependence on the US, such as whatever, name it, such as a complete democratic deficit of the EU, such as the fact that, oh God, name any. There's so many problems that we have to deal with, and that the EU is refusing to deal with. And this is my dilemma. On the one hand, I see that European cooperation is important. On the one hand, I cannot support the EU at all in this shit. I cannot support the EU. I am completely Eurosceptic, not because I hate Europe, not because I hate European cooperation, but because the European Union is a disappointment. So what are we going to do about this? This is now my question, because, I feel that, you can complain, you can look at the problem and say, that's a problem. But then you also need to think of a solution. So what's the solution? Well, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is anymore. I don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't know. Because it's bad now, but it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse, I fear. Because don't forget, in a couple of months, the next European elections are going to be here. The next European elections. And what do you think is going to happen then? The same people are going to get in. The same people who made a mess of it the past 5 years are going to get in. Because it's practically impossible to get into the EU, into European politics, into European decision making, if you are not a part of the inner crowd of the political establishment. Because don't forget, the EU is not democracy. So the same people are going to get in, the same crowd is going to get in, who made such a mess of it for the past 5 years. And specifically, we've seen this. Our European empress, our European dictator, and yes, you hear the term dictators spread about a lot, but in this case, I really mean it, because she makes laws, but she's not been elected by anyone. It makes her a dictator. Literally. The literal meaning of the word dictator. That's what Ursula von der Leyen is. So, Ursula von der Leyen has already announced that she wants a second term as European Commission President. And she's probably going to get it as well. She's probably going to get it. And that's the problem. Because if she is going to run unopposed, and she'll probably run unopposed, then she's going to be picked behind closed door by the European Council. She's going to be presented as the fait accompli. to the European Parliament, and then they're going to basically tell the European Parliament, well, yes, you can vote no, but then who? You have to vote for, or we're going to do it anyway. We're going to pick her anyway. So this is the problem. Then Ursula is going to get in for another 5 years, and she's going to continue to do what she's been doing for the past 5 years, which is run Europe completely into the ground. We've seen how Europe has been run completely into the ground, how there is no real European spirit, how there's no real European cooperation. There's less European spirit in Europe right now, I wager, than there was during the 1990s when the EU didn't even exist yet. There is no real European spirit in Europe right now. There's no real European cooperation in Europe right now. There's only rules and regulations and the spirit of do as you're told or else. And if Ursula von der Leyen will be appointed as European President, European Commission President again, she will continue what she's been doing for the past 5 years, which is completely destroy the rule of law, completely run Europe into the ground, completely continue to make the EU more and more dependent on the US. And this is something that we need to do whatever we can to avoid and to stop. The problem is, what can we do about this? And this is a real problem, because as a short interlude, there was an opinion poll held, I think last week or last month or whatever, in the Netherlands. Now, not that I really put much faith in opinion polls, but still interesting little tidbit, because it shows that Dutch people, this was a Dutch opinion poll, feel much the same way as I do personally, and many Europeans do in general. And that's this opinion poll polled a whole bunch of citizens, as well as local council members, local mayors, and so on and so forth, basically local politicians. The result of this was basically about how do you feel about the European Union? What do you see, and what do you think? And the result of this was very striking. It said that people see the point of European cooperation, very much so. People don't really want the Netherlands, their country, our country, in my case, my country, to be isolated from Europe. But at the same time, they have no faith whatsoever in the EU itself, because of the complete lack of quality of the European politicians. And also, and this I found was very, very telling, because of the complete impossibility for citizens to get involved in European policy making and European decision making, because the EU is still very, very elitist and a little closed world on its own. And this is a problem, because you will never build a European spirit if you don't actually allow Europeans to rule themselves and make decisions and come together and just discuss, and so on and so forth, all the good things about democracy, to actually have a European democracy. You will never have a European spirit if you cannot have a European democracy. Just like you cannot have a European army without having a European democracy first. It is all contingent on a European democracy first. And we don't have that right now. And if Ursula von der Leyen will continue her reign of terror for the next 5 years, then there will never be a European democracy, because she will completely destroy Europe, and we will basically continue to be what we are right now, which is a dependency of the United States, which is a protectorate of the United States. And frankly, I don't stand for that. Frankly, I do not want Europe to be ruled by the US. I do not want Europe to be a protectorate of the US. I do not want Europe to remain a dependency of NATO and the US. But this is exactly what will continue to happen if Ursula von der Leyen is allowed to get a second term as European Commission President. Now, the question I ask you, though, is what can we do about this? And frankly, I'm not sure. Because, you know, I've complained about this a lot. I complain a lot about the bureaucracy and the corruption within Europe. I have shown quite a lot of examples of this. I report on this, you know, because I think it's important. I think it's important to rid the EU of corruption and of bureaucracy, and to actually involve some sort of, you know, get some sort of real democracy going in the EU. So basically, we need to reform the EU. It's as simple as that. But even complaining itself is not enough. Reporting itself is not enough. You need to do more than just reporting. And yes, I have been doing more than just reporting. I've been poking my nose into the GMOs. I've been poking my nose into the working of the European Union. I've been poking my nose into the digital euro and the European digital identity and everything that the EU is pushing that people simply don't want and don't need, and that doesn't actually solve any problems that Europe is currently faced with. So even though I've been reporting, and even though I've been trying to get some action, you know, trying to make some change, it's not enough, because I think that complaining is good and complaining is important, especially if you complain to the European parliamentarians, especially if you complain to the European Council. You should definitely do that as much as possible. But at the same time, complaining alone is not enough. You also, once you've identified the problem, you also need to bring a solution. The problem is, I'm not quite sure what the solution is. I'm not quite sure, because frankly, I'm only one guy, right? I'm only one guy, so I can't do it all on my own. So I don't know what the solution is. The only thing I can think of right now, to be honest, is that there's going to be elections again, and Ursula von der Leyen is going to be running, apparently, unopposed as European Council President, and she's going to get picked again. This is my prediction. She's going to get picked again as European Council President by the European Council, or European Commission President, to be specific, by the European Council, presented as the only choice to the European Parliament. They will vote yes for her, because they've already made the deal behind closed doors, and then we'll end up with another 5 years of Ursula von der Leyen and basically being an American Chinese colony. So the only thing I can think of is this: when that happens, we as European citizens need to present our own chosen candidate. We need to pick a candidate and choose our own candidate and send a letter basically to the European Parliament and to the European Council and to the European Commission, saying that we oppose, as European citizens, we oppose 5 more years for Ursula von der Leyen, because she's made a mess of it for the past 5 years, and we want our own candidate, and we propose our own candidate, and we demand actual debates, we demand an actual vote, open vote, we demand actual democracy. This is what I suggest right now. This is the only solution I can think of right now. And yeah, I assume that they'll try to ignore when I stick my nose in that thing as well. They will try to ignore me. It's probably a mad idea. It's probably an insane idea. I mean, who am I, right? To stick my nose in between the high and the mighty, in the halls of the high and the mighty. Who am I? I'm just a guy. But somebody's got to do something. So this is what I propose. I propose we pick our own president. I propose we pick our own candidate and present that candidate with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of signatures to the EU, and demand that at least at the debate an open election for this very, very, very important post. And they'll try and ignore us, but I think that if we do this and actually have thousands of signatures, we might actually achieve something. We might at least achieve to convey the message that nobody wants von der Leyen. We might actually get somebody in who actually gives a damn about Europe. At worst we've tried. At best we've succeeded. So this is the solution I am proposing right now to you people. And I hope that, you know, I'm going to do this. I've made up my mind. I mean, I think people will probably think I'm insane. I'm completely insane for trying this, for, you know, messing about with the EU and with and trying to actually get some democracy in democratic processes in the EU. And people will probably say I'm insane and completely hopeless and whatever. And I don't care. I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. I'm gonna do this. Oh yes, I am. And I need your help for this, because I'm only one guy, man. I need your help for this. So please, first of all, like this video. Second of all, subscribe to my channel. Third of all, send me a message, man. Go to my website. Send me your signature. Send me your support. Send me just a message saying, hi, how are you? Whatever. Just send me a message. Send me your support. Send me your signature. So I can put it under a letter and send it with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of signatures of European citizens who want change, who want real democracy for Europe. Do this. And then together we can actually make a difference and make Europe better again.